Imagine waking up one day, standing in front of the mirror, and not recognizing the woman staring back. Not because her face has changed, but because her essence has. Her gaze no longer reflects the quiet desperation of someone seeking approval. Her posture isn't curved by insecurity or the ache to be chosen. There's something else, something electric, unapologetic, alive. Now imagine this. She walks into a room and people feel her before they see her. Eyes turn, not in lust, not in envy, but in reverence. It's not her makeup, not her dress, not even the way she speaks. It's something older than beauty, something primordial. What is that? She hasn't said a word, yet the atmosphere shifts around her. She isn't loud. She doesn't chase attention, but attention bends around her like gravity to a star. And the strangest part? She wasn't always like this. A few years ago, she was lost in a cycle of overgiving, over-apologizing, over-performing. She measured her worth in fragments. How wanted she was, how needed, how chosen. Now, she walks as if she's chosen herself. So here's the question that haunts many but few dare to ask out loud. What makes a woman truly irresistible? Not just to others, but to life itself. It's not the cliché answers. It's not about seduction or surface charm. Not about perfect proportions or a flawless face. Jung would have scoffed at that kind of thinking. The Swiss psychoanalyst spent his life exploring the unseen forces. Archetypes, the shadow, the anima and animus. Those energies beneath the surface that shape who we become and how the world responds to us. He believed that people aren't drawn to appearances. They're drawn to wholeness, to integration, to someone who has become friends with her darkness and her light, her chaos and her clarity. And that woman, rare, terrifyingly authentic, and radiantly sovereign, becomes magnetic in ways no external trait ever could. But this raises another paradox. If that kind of woman exists, why is she so rare? Why do so many women feel exhausted trying to be everything to everyone, only to feel invisible in the process? Why do they work harder, care more, love deeper, only to be overlooked for someone who seems to do none of that? It's infuriating, maddening, soul-crushing. But what if the problem isn't in how much she gives? What if it's in what part of herself she's giving from? Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not just the pretty parts. The dark, the wild, the hungry parts too. The parts that society trained women to suppress. The anger, the ambition, the erotic instinct, the desire to be more than just nurturing. These are not flaws to be fixed. These are sources of power waiting to be claimed. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Many women are taught to be desirable. Few are taught to be irresistible. Desirable is passive. It seeks approval. Irresistible is active. It commands resonance. Desirable waits to be chosen. Irresistible chooses herself. Desirable bends to fit in. Irresistible breaks molds without apology. So the question isn't, how can I be more attractive? The question is, what would happen if I stop hiding the parts of me that are already magnetic? What if the habits that make a woman irresistible have nothing to do with impressing others, and everything to do with integrating herself? What if you've spent your life chasing a version of womanhood that was designed to keep you disconnected from your true power? And most importantly, are you willing to burn all of that down to become the woman you were actually meant to be? Because the path of becoming her, the irresistible, the integrated, the unforgettable, is not comfortable. It's a rebellion against everything society told you was nice, or safe, or appropriate. It is the journey back to the self, capital S. The one Jung said is buried beneath layers of masks and social conditioning. The one that can't be performed, only remembered. This isn't about flirting tricks or fashion hacks. It's about becoming the woman whose energy speaks before her words do. The woman who knows her wounds, but doesn't live from them. The woman who can be soft without collapsing, wild without losing direction. The woman whom men may desire. But more importantly, the woman the universe conspires to move for. Are you her? Or are you still performing the woman the world told you to be? Let's begin peeling back the layers. not to become something new, but to remember what was buried underneath. You were taught to behave, to smile when spoken to not make a scene. You were taught that being liked is safety, that approval is currency, and that the easiest way to survive is to become what others want. You were conditioned, subtly and consistently, to abandon yourself. And here lies the invisible tragedy. You didn't even know it was happening. By the time you were old enough to ask yourself, "Who am I?" the answer had already been distorted by years of quiet compliance. You had long since built your identity out of other people's preferences. Carl Jung would call this the construction of the persona, the mask you wear to navigate the world. A necessary mask, yes, but one that becomes a prison if mistaken for your true face. Your persona smiles when it's tired. It agrees to things your soul resents. It quiets your truth so that others remain comfortable. And worst of all, it starts to believe this facade is you. But behind the persona lives the shadow, all the parts of you that didn't feel welcome in the light. Your rage, your desires, your boldness, your self-trust, your eroticism, your hunger to create and destroy, to challenge and claim, to expand beyond what's polite. You buried them because at some point in your life, you learned that being too much meant being rejected. And as a child, rejection felt like death. So you silenced those parts, smiled wider, became more agreeable. You shape-shifted into what Jung called the well-adapted woman, externally successful, internally fragmented. But wholeness can't be faked. The body remembers. The soul remembers. And people feel when you're divided from yourself, even if you say all the right things. This division creates what existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith, a state in which a person lies to herself in order to conform to societal expectations, trading authenticity for comfort. You betray yourself, not out of malice, but out of survival. And it works until it doesn't. Because no matter how perfectly you play the role, there's a dull ache that won't go away. A nameless grief, a quiet anxiety, a suspicion that something about your life doesn't feel like it belongs to you. This, right here, is the hidden problem. You have become disconnected from your authentic self. And in its place, you were a collage of who you thought you had to be. And the more successful you become at playing that part, the further you drift from the part of you that actually makes you magnetic. You see, Jung believed that true power, true attraction, arises not from performance, but from integration. From owning every part of yourself, even the ones you've been taught to be ashamed of. Take, for example, the archetype of the wild woman. She's fierce, intuitive, sensual, unapologetically alive. Not destructive, but uncontainable. She doesn't exist to be decoded or understood. She simply is, and that's her power. But where is she in your life? Has she been muted by the need to be low maintenance? Has she been traded for stability, for being agreeable, for being liked? Has she been turned into a shadow version of herself, seductive but hollow, powerful but disconnected? Most women have no idea that they've exiled their most potent energy, and without it, their presence feels diluted. Not because they aren't beautiful, but because they aren't whole. Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." In other words, if you want to be yourself, you must be willing to be alone for a while, to walk through the wilderness of not belonging until you belong to yourself again. But why is that so hard? Because of the myth of the good woman. She's selfless. She's sweet. She doesn't ask for much. She doesn't make people uncomfortable. She puts everyone before herself. And if she's attractive, it must be effortless, never intentional, never powerful, never owned. This myth is killing your magnetism. Why? Because the more you conform to what others want, the more you betray what your soul wants. And the soul has a strange way of making itself heard. Through fatigue, through restlessness, through the haunting feeling that something essential is missing. Carl Jung knew this well. He warned that if we fail to integrate our shadow, if we fail to embrace our hidden instincts and reclaim the exiled parts, we remain forever fragmented. We live as ghosts in our own lives. But the moment a woman starts integrating her shadow, not in rebellion, but in reverence. She starts becoming irresistible in the most profound way. Not because she fits a mold, but because she refuses to. She becomes a force of nature. Not reckless, not chaotic, but wild in the way forests are wild. Ancient, intelligent, unpredictable. Men don't just notice her. People do. Opportunities, conversations, synchronicities begin to happen around her, like she's a tuning fork for fate. She's not performing, she's transmitting. So the real problem isn't that you're not attractive enough. The real problem is you've been taught to suppress the very qualities that make you unforgettable. And those qualities? They're not taught in school. They're not praised on social media. But they are encoded deep in your psyche, waiting to be reawakened. The question is, will you listen to the whisper or wait for the scream? Because the longer you ignore the call of your integrated self, the more life will feel like it's happening to you rather than through you. And until you face the unconscious habits, beliefs, and fears that are keeping you small, you'll keep chasing attraction instead of embodying it. You'll keep being desirable, but never unforgettable. Now let's trace the ripple effects of this disconnect. Let's look at the unseen consequences that shape not only your relationships, but your very sense of worth. It begins in small, almost imperceptible ways. You notice it when someone talks over you, and you let them. When your heart says no, but your mouth says yes. When you dress not for expression, but for acceptance. When you post, speak, or even think with a quiet voice in your head whispering, will they approve? You ignore it because everyone does. You call it being nice, being humble, being likable. But behind that civility lies a nervous system in a constant state of hypervigilance, always scanning for rejection, always micromanaging your existence. And one day you realize you've become a stranger to your own desire. This is the first unseen consequence. You stop trusting yourself. When you live too long in the persona, that well-adapted, performance-based identity, your instincts begin to rust. You no longer know what you want, only what's expected. You no longer feel what's true, only what's safe. You mistake anxiety for attraction, caretaking for connection, and silence for peace. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That is the second consequence. You begin to confuse patterns with destiny. You find yourself repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable men. You constantly feel like you're not enough, no matter how much you do. You enter rooms and shrink before you speak. Why? Because the shadow, the disowned parts of you, are no longer dormant. They are acting out in your life. That anger you repress, it festers into resentment. That sensuality you bury, it turns into anxiety or obsession with beauty. That ambition you suppress, it whispers in sabotage, never letting you truly rise. Your life becomes a theater of projection, and you don't even know you're the playwright. People mirror back to you what you unconsciously believe. Not what you say, but what you are. So if you carry an inner belief, even subtly, that you are not worthy unless you're needed, you will attract situations that keep you overgiving and underloved. And society is built to reinforce this. We live in a culture of constant comparison, curated perfection, and performative femininity. Everywhere you look, there's a whisper telling you to fix yourself, your body, your tone, your lifestyle, your ambition. Algorithms reward the illusion of effortless perfection. But real magnetism is never effortless. It's forged in the crucible of radical self-reclamation. This is not just a personal issue. It's a spiritual epidemic. Most women are suffering from a form of energetic malnourishment, starving for authenticity while being fed performance. Their bodies are tired, their hearts are guarded, and their eyes are searching for something they can't name. This is the third consequence. You become disconnected from the source of your power. Not external power, influence, charm, control, but internal sovereignty. The kind of power that speaks through your presence, that awakens when you say no, without guilt, that deepens when you stop chasing and start choosing. But to reclaim this power, you must understand what's truly been lost. your energetic integrity. You leak energy when you people please. You leak energy when you shrink your truth. You leak energy when you over-explain, over-apologize, over-function. And when enough energy leaks, you begin to dim. You become tired in your bones. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, the kind that comes from abandoning your essence. That is the fourth consequence. You become invisible to the life that's meant for you. Not because you're unworthy, but because you've camouflaged yourself into something unrecognizable. Your soul signals to the universe, but it's a distorted signal. You attract relationships, jobs, and experiences that resonate with your persona, not yourself. And slowly, quietly, your life becomes a loop. Same patterns, different faces. Same ache, new distractions. You start to believe that maybe this is all there is. That magnetism, radiance, irresistible presence, it's for other women. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be neutral. You were born to disrupt, to feel deeply, to want audaciously. You were never meant to perform your femininity. You were meant to embody it. And true embodiment starts when you stop abandoning yourself for acceptance. But how? It starts by facing the habits that no one tells you are draining your essence. The habits that Carl Jung would say are not just behavioral, but symbolic. Each one represents a fracture in your psyche, a place where your shadow rules in silence. Let's name them. Over-accommodating, sacrificing your needs to maintain harmony, feeding the belief that your value lies in being easy. Emotional self-censorship, suppressing your anger, sadness, or desire out of fear of being too much. Passive magnetism, relying on being chosen rather than choosing, waiting rather than inviting. Shame-fueled modesty, diming your beauty, sensuality, or ambition so others won't feel threatened. Constant self-optimization, treating yourself like a project, never allowing yourself to simply be. Spiritual bypassing, using positivity or peace to avoid confrontation, grief, or difficult truths. Each of these habits keeps you fragmented. Each one whispers, stay small, stay silent, stay safe. But you cannot be magnetic and small at the same time. You cannot be powerful and apologetic. You cannot be irresistible if you keep abandoning the parts of you that are actually irresistible. You were not born to be consumed. You were born to remember. And if you feel the ache, the subtle grief, the longing to reclaim something you can't quite name, you're already waking up. Because the woman who is truly attractive, the woman whose energy stops time, is not a product of perfection. She is a product of integration. She has met her shadow and made an ally. She no longer seeks wholeness in others because she's returned to her own. She is not the loudest in the room, but she is the deepest. And now we begin the rebellion, the breaking of the spell, the burning of the old scripts. Because to become the woman the world cannot forget, you must first become the woman you were trained to fear. There is a moment in every woman's life where the mask begins to slip. It doesn't happen with fireworks or dramatic epiphanies. It happens quietly, in the middle of a dinner party, when laughter feels forced, in the mirror, when your own reflection feels unfamiliar, in bed beside someone who doesn't see you, even though you've given them everything. And in that quiet ache, a question arises. What if I stopped trying to be liked and started trying to be true? That is the beginning of the rebellion. Not a rebellion of rage, but of reclamation. Not a war against men or society or beauty standards, but a deep, cellular return to yourself. A revolution of essence. A resurrection of the parts of you you buried to be loved. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Meaning, you do not find wholeness by chasing perfection. You find it by confronting the pieces of yourself you've abandoned. And so, to become her, the woman who is truly, irresistibly attractive, you must break 6 deeply embedded patterns. Each one is a chain, and each one, when shattered, becomes a doorway. From over-accommodating to boundaried radiance, you were taught that love is earned through sacrifice. That being easy to love means being agreeable, flexible, undemanding. But Jung would tell you, true love requires boundaries, not bargaining. The irresistible woman doesn't overextend herself to win affection. She isn't rude, she's rooted. She knows where she ends and another begins. Her no is not rejection. It's a declaration of self-respect. And that clarity, it creates trust. It commands respect. It magnetizes. Let people feel your edges. If they cannot hold your truth, they do not deserve your softness. From emotional suppression to sacred expression, your emotions are not liabilities. They are language. And when you suppress them to be pleasant, you silence your most intuitive compass. The irresistible woman is not emotionally chaotic. She's emotionally fluent. She knows her anger is sacred. Her grief is cleansing. Her joy is expansive. She doesn't perform her feelings for approval. She feels them fully to remain clear. Want to become magnetic? Learn to express what you feel without apology. Your emotional aliveness is what gives your energy its texture, and that texture is unforgettable. From passive magnetism to intentional energy, some women wait to be noticed. Others choose to be visible. The former hope to be chosen. The latter choose themselves. This is not about chasing. It's about claiming. The irresistible woman isn't passive. She doesn't sit quietly hoping her energy speaks. She directs it. She enters a room like a tuning fork. She makes eye contact with purpose. She speaks not to fill silence, but to leave an imprint. Carl Jung explored the archetype of the anima, the inner feminine force, both mysterious and magnetic. When a woman owns this inner anima consciously, she stops hoping someone will feel her value. She becomes it. And value cannot be ignored. From shame-fueled modesty to embodied power, there is a silent epidemic of women who shrink themselves to seem more palatable. They downplay their beauty, their accomplishments, their desires, afraid of being too much. But hear this, your too muchness is your invitation to authenticity. The irresistible woman doesn't hide her light to protect fragile egos. She doesn't pretend to be smaller, so others feel safe. She knows her beauty isn't just physical. It's energetic, born of presence, depth, and wild grace. There's a difference between modesty and self-erasure. One is humble, the other is trauma. Stop apologizing for your glow. Embodiment is not arrogance, it's remembrance. From constant self-optimization to present aliveness, you are not a project. You are not a perpetual self-help assignment. The woman who is truly magnetic has stopped trying to be perfect because she realizes perfection is just a strategy to avoid rejection. She has presence, and presence cannot exist in a mind that is constantly self-analyzing. Carl Jung understood this well. The psyche doesn't heal through endless control. It heals through integration, through allowing, not manipulating, through embracing contradictions, not erasing them. Let go of the grind. Rest in your being. It is from presence, not pressure, that your true frequency emerges. From spiritual bypassing to courageous wholeness, positivity is not power when it becomes a mask. Too often, women are taught to rise above, to stay high vibe, to just let it go, but Jung knew, what you ignore doesn't disappear. It becomes your fate. The irresistible woman doesn't bypass her pain. She minds it. She walks into her shadow with her head high and her heart open. She does not fear discomfort. She listens to it. True light is forged in darkness. And the woman who can walk through fire without turning to ash becomes unforgettable. This is how the rebellion begins. Not with better makeup, but with deeper awareness. Not with better dating advice, but with unshakable boundaries. Not with chasing validation, but by embodying truth. And slowly, something changes. Your presence becomes denser, richer. People begin to respond differently. Conversations deepen. Men start speaking to your soul instead of your appearance. Friends lean in, not because you entertain them, but because you anchor them. You begin to feel seen, not for your performance, but for your essence. And that, right there, is the most radical transformation of all. You are no longer trying to be attractive. You have become a mirror of what people have forgotten within themselves. A woman who has met her shadow and lived to love it. A woman who no longer seeks permission to be radiant. A woman who doesn't perform desire, but embodies it. This is not a fantasy. This is you, when you remember. But there is still one more layer. One more revelation, deeper than any behavior, more powerful than any habit. Because behind every habit, behind every rebellion, lies the final truth. The one that rearranges your entire understanding of who you are and what it means to be magnetic. There comes a moment when the seeking stops. When you've read all the books, watched all the videos, taken all the courses. When you've journaled, meditated, cried, screamed, healed. When you've looked under every rock of your past and every corner of your psyche in search of the final answer. And then silence. Not empty, not numb, just still. And in that stillness, something ancient stirs. A voice so quiet you could miss it. So familiar you almost mistake it for your own breath. It doesn't speak in language. It speaks in memory, not of past events, but of something deeper. The memory of who you were before the world told you who to be. This is the final truth. You are not becoming her. You are remembering her. The most powerful, magnetic, irresistible version of you is not an invention. She is your essence without distortion. She is the self Jung spoke of, the totality of your being, your conscious and unconscious, your light and your shadow, fully integrated and alive. This is not about habits. It never really was. Habits are just echoes, symptoms, rituals on the surface. True attraction, the kind that stirs the world, moves people, opens doors, bends fate, comes not from effort but from alignment. When your outer life begins to mirror your inner truth, something clicks. The universe begins to cooperate. Serendipity replaces struggle. People begin to feel you, not just see or hear you, but feel you like a tuning fork vibrating at their core. Because you're no longer a woman in pieces. You are a woman in presence. Let's go deeper. Carl Jung believed that the self was not just a psychological construct. It was a sacred center, the union of opposites, the dance of feminine and masculine, instinct and intellect, wildness and wisdom. Most people spend their lives split in half, performing only the parts that feel safe, hiding the ones that feel dangerous. But the moment you invite all of yourself to the table, the moment you stop negotiating which parts deserve to live, you awaken something that no one can take from you. Embodied sovereignty. This is the truth most fear because it ends the game. You are not here to be chosen. You are not here to perform perfection. You are not here to be acceptable. You are here to remember yourself whole. And when you do, when you reclaim every exiled part, every silenced truth, every instinct that was shamed out of you, you become dangerous. Not in the reckless sense, but in the way nature is dangerous, in the way oceans are dangerous, in the way wildfires purify the forest and thunder shakes the sky. You become a force of life, not a product, not a persona, but a pulse that cannot be replicated. Because here is the final paradox. The most irresistible women are the ones who are no longer trying to be. They've stopped chasing admiration. They've stopped performing softness. They've stopped hustling for their own worth. They walk like someone who knows that love is not something to earn, but something to allow. They speak like someone who trusts their own silence. They express like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to share. They are not loud, but they are luminous. They are not flawless, but they are full. And people are drawn to them without understanding why. Because you can't explain what's ancient. You can only feel it. This is what Carl Jung knew, that the greatest journey is not outward, it's inward. That the most magnetic person is not the most perfect, but the most integrated. That power without presence is hollow, and presence without truth is impossible. So if you want to be irresistible, don't look in the mirror for signs of change. Look in your stillness. Are you making choices that reflect your soul or your fear? Are your yes born of truth or obligation? Is your beauty something you wear or something you embody? Because the world doesn't need more perfect women. The world needs more remembered women. Women who walk like the earth belongs to them. Not in arrogance, but in remembrance. Women who choose their lives the way artists choose colors, with boldness, with joy, with reverence. Women who don't just love, but invite the world to feel alive in their presence. And the habits? Yes, they matter, but only when they arise from this final truth. You are not here to become magnetic. You already are. You just forgot. Now, remember her, the wild one, the wise one, the sensual one, the silent watcher, the fire starter, the boundary keeper, the truth teller, the woman who doesn't chase because she calls things in, the woman who doesn't prove because she knows. Are you her? Or more accurately, are you finally ready to stop pretending that you aren't?